They have been thinking about this for over 1,000 days. The last time that they beat Michigan was pre-COVID. College football has never been better. Interest has never been higher. Believe that we are at the dawn of the golden age of college football. It was an epic day of college football. It was one of those days where you fall in love with the sport all over again. Hey, welcome into the program and a very happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. You're listening to, watching the Joel Klatt Show. I am Joel Klatt. This show is brought to you by Hampton by Hilton. And folks, listen, I love college football. You know that. I love it even more on these holiday weeks. And so happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. I'm certainly very thankful for a lot of things. I talked about that on our last show about how thankful I am for college football fans. I'm very thankful for my Savior, Jesus Christ. My family, my wife, Sarah, is incredible. My 3 boys, my entire family. I'm very thankful for my family here at the Joel Klatt Show at Fox Sports, college football fans, all of that. This week just puts it all in perspective. We've got picks and previews today, but remember, wherever you're listening to this podcast, go ahead and rate and review us. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the show. Hit that button down below for your notifications so you know exactly when our content drops. Leave a comment down below if you would. And then wherever you like to social media, we are there at Joel Klatt Show. Before I get started on my picks and previews, I do have to give a little bit of an apology because, guys, the last program, I could not speak. I was fumbling over every single word. I could not speak. I don't know what was going on. It's obviously the holiday week. You're preparing for Michigan, Ohio State. It's a long week. The boys are off of school, so I was trying to hang out with them. We were playing a little turkey bowl action. We went to a movie as a family. It was a lot of fun. And my mind was jumbled. So just a quick apology. I could not speak on the last show. So hopefully you got all of those points in the college football playoff rankings reaction show. But this one I'm fired up about. Picks and previews on a Thanksgiving week. It was one of my favorite weeks of the year as a player to play during the holiday. And now we get a great weekend of matchups with everything on the line for a lot of different teams. So we got some picks and previews. Then I'm going to outline some scenarios in the Big 12 because that's some madness. And just remember, we were 4-3 a week ago. Damn that Auburn A&M game. As soon as it goes into triple overtime and it's 2-point conversion shootout style, I'm like, well, I lost the 2.5. And anybody... I was on the wrong side of the 2.5. Thanks a lot. Overtime rules suck. Okay, so we were 4-3, still a winning record last week. For the year, we're 42-27. That's 61%. You're welcome. Are you thankful for that on a Thanksgiving weekend? You should be. Was that too much? Probably. Whatever. 42-27, 61%. I won't give you a pick in this game because I'm calling it. It's the game as Michigan heads on the road to face Ohio State. 120th edition of the greatest rivalry in college sports and all of sports as Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes look to end the 3-game losing streak to the Michigan Wolverines. And there has been a lot of pressure on Ryan Day to do that. Let's just put it in perspective of the Ohio State fan base. If you're out there and you're an Ohio State fan, you know that there's basically 3 objectives to this season. Number 1, you have to beat Michigan. Number 2, you'd really love to win the Big Ten championship. And number 3, boy, with this roster, you'd like to win a national championship. Those are lofty goals, but it doesn't even begin until this week when you can possibly end that 3-game slide to the Michigan Wolverines. They have been thinking about this for over 1,000 days. The last time that they beat Michigan was pre-COVID. In fact, Saturday, when they play this game, it'll be 5 years to the day that they last beat Michigan. So the pressure clearly all on Ohio State. They've got the number 2 rank. Michigan's got no pressure because their season has not been a success whatsoever. They got their bowl eligibility last week when they were able to beat Northwestern, and then here we are, and we've got the 120th edition of the game. Now, I will say, even though Michigan's season has been a disappointment, and by all accounts it has been a learning experience for a guy like Sharon Moore in his first year as a head coach. He's going to get better, and he's going to change, and he's going to evolve based on the way that this season went. He will evolve both on field as a coach and off field as a coach. I think that we have seen that, by the way, both of those things transpire. We've seen them adjust on the field, namely the way that they went about their offensive game plan against Northwestern, even their defensive game plan against Northwestern. And we've seen that off the field in the way that they have gone after Bryce Underwood and really put a premium on high school recruiting and trying to give those NIL dollars to players that aren't even at Michigan yet. So these are clear evolutions of this program from the Jim Harbaugh era to now the Sharon Moore era. So that's going to be launched into this matchup. Will it pay dividends this week? We shall see. I will say that their best game was last week against Northwestern by a wide margin. They scored 50 points. Their defense was outstanding. And you could say, well, it was against Northwestern. Well, fine, but at least we've seen it now. At least we've seen their offense do something to a substantial level. And then we're going to see this Ohio State team play with all the pressure on them. They've got the number 2 ranking. They need to win in order to go to Indianapolis and play Oregon for a Big Ten championship game. And I'm just interested every time I do and cover these Ohio State games is like, is this the week that they evolve in the passing game and really attack down the field? I don't think that they've actually unleashed the full capability of their offense because I don't think that they have unleashed the full capability of what I think can be their most dynamic offensive player, and that's Jeremiah Smith. I get it. He's just a true freshman, but he is a dynamic threat. Speaking of Jeremiah Smith, he's a mismatch, yes, but we have an incredible piece online right now at foxsports.com. It was put out by Michael Cohen, and he's got a piece out there on Jeremiah Smith. Again, go check out foxsports.com right now because Michael went down to Miami, and he got some of the great stories about this legend of Jeremiah growing up in that area down in Miami and what has driven Jeremiah to be the best. Because trust me, I got to sit with him last week in the lunchroom. He has a very unique drive. It reminds me a lot of Marvin Harrison, but you understood that because Marvin had Marvin Sr., and so you understood that like Marvin was driven for something even bigger. Jeremiah Smith is at Ohio State for a purpose. He wanted to play under Brian Hartline to become the best he could possibly become. He wanted to play under Emeka Ibuka, who came back in order to mentor Jeremiah Smith. All of these things come together. And again, I would just encourage everyone, get over there to foxsports.com and check out that piece on Jeremiah Smith. The matchup in this game always comes down to the line of scrimmage. Why has Michigan won 3 in a row against Ohio State? Well, because they've been dominant at the line of scrimmage. They've been able to win the rushing battle. And I think that there are big questions whether they can do that this year. The Ohio State defense has been incredible. They're the number 1 defense in the country, period, both total defense and scoring defense. We saw them get after Curtis Rourke last week in Indiana. We've seen them stop the rushing game at times. We've seen them evolve schematically and produce more pressure on the quarterback, which they did not do against Oregon about 5 weeks ago. That's the main question that I have is this Ohio State defense. If they can stop Michigan from running the football, then they're going to have a great chance to win because that's where the game is won and lost. By the way, it's going to be really cold in the 20s. There's a chance for a lot of wind, so it could be a ground game in general. Michigan's offense has not been very effective other than that game against Northwestern, and now they go against one of, if not the best defense in the country. And I think it's going to be interesting. Jim Knowles' group, they like to bring pressure. Can't wait to see if they do that and see how this goes. This is always a great game. It doesn't matter what the records are. You're always going to get the best effort. And let's face it, if you're going to build a team that could threaten Ohio State, I think that you would want to build a team first and foremost with strength in the defensive line. That's exactly where Michigan is strongest. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, you get that new interior of the offensive line of Ohio State. And then, there's going to be some questions there about their effectiveness and how they could run the football and potentially win the ground game. So that's that game. That's where Gus, Jenny, and I will be. Remember, coverage begins at 9 a.m. Eastern time as Big Noon Kickoff has a fresh 3-hour edition of Big Noon Kickoff. And then we've got the game for you at noon Eastern. Hey, let's head out on the road, sponsored by Hampton by Hilton. When nothing else in life is 100% guaranteed, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay. Who's heading out on the road? Texas is heading out on the road. They're not going far, but it ain't going to be a nice warm welcome down there in Aggie land, as Texas is going to head to Texas A&M, and number 3 Texas, a 5.5-point favorite on the road against number 20 Texas A&M. This game is so emotionally charged. You've seen the ticket prices, by the way. Have you seen this online? It's like the most expensive college football ticket, I don't know, like in history, certainly for a regular season game. Why? Because everyone in this rivalry, and it's a good one, it's a good rivalry, has been waiting for this matchup for 13 years. We haven't seen it for 13 years because of the conference move to the SEC by the Aggies while Texas held pat. They don't like each other. And from this, listen, like the distance has only breeded more contempt. So now we get this edition for the first time in 13 years, and I can't wait for this because the stakes couldn't be higher. They did not play a lot of games, even as Big 12 foes, with this much at stake. The winner of this game goes to Atlanta and faces Georgia for the SEC championship game. It does not get better or bigger than that for Texas A&M. Night game at Kyle Field. We've seen how difficult it is to win there at night, although Notre Dame was able to do it. LSU was not able to do it. Quinn Ewers, the quarterback for Texas, he was banged up and hurting in that second half last week against Kentucky. He did have an MRI on that ankle, and it looks like it's just a mild sprain, and he should go. Is this a huge worry for Texas? I'm going to come back to this. Normally, a player of his caliber, you would say, yes, this is a huge worry in terms of his availability. For Texas, is it really because you have Arch? With Arch as your backup, Texas is going to be just fine. Just fine in terms of depth at quarterback. So while I think that they're better at times with Quinn out there and his ability to throw the ball, in particular down the field, if he's not effective, they have an answer. And in these types of games, that's what you have to have. Is you have to have answers. If they take something away from you, if someone goes down, what is your answer? I always go back to this game in a huge matchup, and I know it wasn't technically a rivalry game, but I go back to last year, the game that we called in Happy Valley when Penn State and Michigan tangled late in the year. And it was very clear that Michigan's offensive line, which was rebuilt at the time, was not going to be able to block Abdul Carter. And they had to make an adjustment. They had to create an answer in the middle of that game. And they did that by putting extra offensive linemen on the field and running the football like 30 straight times. Okay, so they had an answer. So Texas might have to have an answer in the event that Quinn Ewers is not ready to go. They have that in Arch Manning. Meanwhile, on the other side, A&M, they missed Le'Veon Moss last week against Auburn. Their run game took a bit of a dive because Moss wasn't on the field. They only ran it for 3.2 yards per carry. A&M, if they can't run it, will they be able to throw the football against Texas? I have my doubts about that. Texas has a great pass defense. Jahdae Barron was just named a finalist for the Thorpe Award. They've got safety Andrew Makuba. He's the transfer from Clemson. They've been really good in terms of pass defense, which has been a fix from last year when that was, I would say, the weakest part of really their team. So if A&M can't run it well, and they're not a great passing team to begin with, do I really think that they're going to be able to put up a bunch of points against this Texas defense, which has been very stout all season long? My answer to that is no. I don't think that they have the requisite answers, while Texas would clearly have those answers. So then you look to the other side, and it's like, well, A&M's defense will have to play incredible in order for them to win this game. Can their defensive line give Texas's offensive line problems like Georgia did? I don't believe they can. I think Georgia is unique in that sense. I think that this experienced veteran offensive line for Texas is just better than that. I don't think that Mike Elko's team has what it takes to win this game. Now, what they do have is home field advantage. What they do have is environment. What they do have is a rivalry game. And weird things can happen in a rivalry game. So do I love having to give 5.5 points if I want to take Texas? No, I don't love having to give 5.5 points. But in any other case, it is pretty clear that you would want to take Texas. I believe that this line has been driven down because of all the external factors like home field advantage and rivalry and 13 years and all this stuff. If you just evaluate the game, Texas is much better than 5.5 point favorites over Texas A&M. And that's what I have to go on. So I like Texas to cover the 5.5 on the road. I like them 28-17 in this one. I think that they get the win. They go to Atlanta and they play Georgia in the SEC championship game. Texas, give the 5.5. South Carolina at Clemson. This one has huge implications as it relates to the college football playoff. I think that the winner of this game becomes a bit of a bubble team, but more so Clemson becomes a bubble team if they're able to win this game. This would be a huge win because South Carolina is playing well. So Dabo Swinney has got his team at home. They're 12th ranked. They're favored by 2.5, and this one should be a really good game. I think it's going to test Clemson. I really do. These two have snuck back into the picture. I don't think South Carolina has a real path to the playoff just because they're going to be blocked out by Alabama and Ole Miss if those two teams win. Whereas Clemson, they would have a chance to say like, hey, the only reason we're not in an ACC championship game is because of some sort of tiebreak rule. So should we really be penalized based on that? And maybe they can actually get themselves into that game. This would be a huge resume builder, in particular for Clemson. I think that they would have a decent argument, maybe not strong, but a decent argument on the bubble for the college football playoff if they were able to knock off South Carolina. Because South Carolina comes into this one, they're on a 5-game winning streak, and Clemson has gone 10-1 since the opening season loss to Georgia. This has been, I think, a game that has built up to a point where we didn't think it was going to be this earlier in the year. And each team has played well enough along the path to present what I think is going to be a really good game. Lenoris Sellers is a dynamic runner. He's improving. I think throwing the ball out on the edge. Clemson's defense, can they make him make a mistake or two? We'll see. I think that the environment there at Clemson is always good, although Louisville handled that earlier in the year. South Carolina's defense has a great pass rush. Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart. This team, they're third in the country in sacks with 39. So I think it's going to be incumbent on Clemson to protect Cade Klubnik with a run game. They're going to have to do that. Can they run the football well enough to keep that rush at bay? Phil Maffa is one of the best backs in the ACC. Klubnik has shown he can use his legs. What do I like in this one? Clemson's favored by 2.5. I think at home, it's a close game, but I think Clemson, with their experience in big games, I think that they get the job done, and they're kind of the bubble team in the college football playoff rankings as we kind of get to the end of the season here. So I like Clemson 31-28. 31-28. I'm going to give the 2.5, and I'm going to take Clemson and Dabo in that one. Notre Dame traveling out west to face USC. Great rivalry, by the way. Love this game. Number 6 Notre Dame is a 7.5-point favorite over the Trojans. Notre Dame is now 1 win away from, I think, locking up that spot in the playoff. If they lose, they're probably out. They've won 9 straight games, 8 of which have been by at least 3 scores. So they've been totally dominating their schedule. They have fixed whatever was ailing them when they lost to Northern Illinois. The big question in this one is going to be about USC's defense and their ability to slow down the Notre Dame running attack. Jeremiah Love is an absolute threat to go to the house every time he touches it. He's gone for 100 or more in 3 of his last 4 games. Riley Leonard can run it. My question about Notre Dame is just like, when are we going to see the evolution of the passing game? Because I think they actually have threats on the outside. Riley Leonard needs to throw the football better and be more efficient throwing the football. If they do that, they can be a threat in the playoff. They really can. But right now, I would lean on Jeremiah Love as well. I think that they need to evolve to be a true threat in the playoff. Do they need to evolve in this one? Probably not. USC, thin up front on the defensive side. That's not a great matchup for them against this Notre Dame team, which is going to be able to control the line of scrimmage. I think Notre Dame is going to dictate this game with their run game. They're going to be able to keep the young offense for USC off the field. I think that this is too much for USC. This is not a matchup that favors the Trojans. If you get them in a high-flying space game, now their talents can equate. But when you get them in a game where they've got to buckle down and win in the trenches, in particular on the defensive side, I don't like that matchup. USC made a QB switch 2 games ago. Jaden Maiava comes in. He's won both games, beating Nebraska and UCLA, but both were 1-score wins. For the year, USC is only 56th in the country in scoring, so it's not like they can get into a shootout with Notre Dame, which has been really prolific offensively since that loss in the last 9 games. I just look at this and I know that the defense is improved. I just don't think that USC is improved enough to beat this Notre Dame team. Notre Dame's really good. Notre Dame is very good. In fact, some would argue that they should be above Penn State in the playoff rankings. I won't go that far because they lost to Northern Illinois. That's still a terrible loss. But since then, they've played much better. I'd love to see them evolve in the passing game a little bit more to be a true threat in the playoff. But they've got enough to win this game. I think they've got enough to win this game handily. And so I'm gonna give the 7.5. I'm taking Notre Dame. I think they could win this one 38-27, something along those, by 11 or more. I think Notre Dame goes out west and gets a win. Tennessee Vandy. Hey, Vol fans. Everything broke your way last week. And now, all you got to do is take care of Vandy. And now, all of a sudden, you're like terrified of Pavia. I would be too. Because 10.5 is too much. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Tennessee. I don't love Tennessee's system. I think it's great when it's great, and as soon as they need an answer, they've got nowhere to go. I talk about this time of year answers all the time. You've got to have the ability to change gears and answer questions in big games throughout the course of the season. This is a huge game. Tennessee was given a huge lifeline last week. The SEC chaos, now they find themselves firmly in the playoff, number 8 in the country, and all they need to do is beat Vandy, and they might even host a playoff game. Dylan Sampson leads the SEC in rushing. I thought he was snubbed for the Doak Walker. There's a lot of snubs. I don't love award season anymore. I think that the people voting on awards don't really know football nor follow college football all that well. So, Sampson, I'm sorry you got snubbed. You're a great player, again, leading the SEC in rushing, and they're a rushing team. I know they'd love to be able to be a passing team, but they're a rushing team. The problem is that they only run it out of that spread stuff. That's what I'm talking about answers. They have no ability to kind of accordion their offense to get big, to get small, to do different things. That's the only thing. Nico Iamaleava still isn't throwing the ball for big yardage. The Vols offense has struggled since we got into SEC play. They're only averaging 23 points per game in conference play. Vandy, they've got Diego Pavia. He's a threat with his legs. He may have, I think he's going to have trouble against the Tennessee front. I think their defensive front is one of the better fronts in college football. So that's why I think they can negate Pavia's threat, which he clearly had against a team like Alabama. And then you watch Alabama last week against Oklahoma, and they got shredded by quarterback run in general. And you think like, okay, well, that makes sense. See, I don't think that the matchup makes sense for Vandy in this one like it did for maybe them against Alabama. I think the front for Tennessee is just better. Vandy's offense has hit the skids lately. They only had 270 total yards per game over their last 4 games. I don't love that. Vanderbilt's offensive line is a big challenge, huge challenge. Tennessee's front is just too good. The last home game of the season for Clark Lee's group, it's been one of the great surprises this season. I just don't think that they win this game. I am going to take the 10.5, though, if I'm Vandy. I think Tennessee wins this one. Because their offense hasn't been super explosive, I could see like a 24-17 game. So I like Vandy to cover. I'll take the 10.5 if I'm Vandy, but I like Tennessee to win, and I think Tennessee is likely going to host a playoff game. Let's go with Miami now at Syracuse, and this is a huge one. So Miami is firmly in that top 10. What are they, number 6 in the CFP? They're 10.5-point favorites at Syracuse. Miami needs to beat Syracuse on the road to reach the ACC championship game. Otherwise, Clemson gets that spot. Can they beat Syracuse? Yeah, they should. Although, do we really trust Miami to do anything? Every game, so behind the scenes here, we've got a guy in our booth, Mitch, and Mitch is a Miami fan, and every week we've got a quad monitor with other games up during our noon game. And every week it seems like Miami is playing at noon. And so every commercial break, Mitch and I check the TV and you're like, what's happening in Miami, and he's a Miami fan, and he rolls his eyes every time we check the score because it's like, oh, geez, here we go again. They're in a tight game with a team that they shouldn't be in a tight game with. Now, they were able to pull away last week, but now they're going up on the road at Syracuse. Kyle McCord and Cam Ward, 1 and 2 in pass yards per game this year in the ACC, both average 360 per game. Syracuse is the most pass-heavy offense in the Power Four, just ahead of Colorado, so that means they are chucking it around. Miami is coming off one of its best defensive games last week, albeit, though, it was against Wake Forest. That doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. McCord, he's going to sling it around. He averages 47.5 passes per game. That is a staggering amount. He's got a really good tight end in Gadsden, who's third in the country in receiving yards by a tight end. That's remarkable. So can we trust the Miami defense, or should we expect a shootout? I expect a shootout. In a shootout, who do I trust more, Kyle McCord or Cam Ward? That's the evolution of this right here. Is Miami's defense going to shut down Kyle McCord? Probably not. So we've got a shootout. Okay, so in a shootout, who do you like? Cam Ward, Kyle McCord? Cam Ward. They're in it. They're comfortable in it. They know what they're doing in a shootout. Do I think that the 10.5 is too much? Yes. Yes, 10.5 is too much. Over-under for this one is 67.5. I see a game that is clearly right up there. I've got it just on the under. Don't love that. But I see Miami winning this one like 35-31. 35-31. No, that's an over. Sorry. What am I talking about? That's 60. That's 66. I've got them just on the under, right? I'm doing that right. Gosh, math when you're on the air is just not very fun. I've got them just on the under, but a shootout, 35-31. Miami wins the game. Syracuse covers. Miami goes to the ACC championship game against SMU, and win or lose that game, Miami is going to be in the playoff. I think a win over Syracuse puts them in the college football playoff, which means here's our picks. Week 14 picks. We're 42-27. That's 61% on the year, and here they are. Here's the 5-pack. Let's go. Thanksgiving week. I've got Texas giving the 5.5. I've got Clemson giving the 2.5, Notre Dame giving 7.5, and then I'm going to take Vandy and Syracuse as dogs. Give me the 10.5 in both of those games over Tennessee and Miami. There's the 5-pack. There are the picks. Let's go. Let's keep it over 61%, and I'm here for it. Now, before we get out of here, I do want to outline some of these crazy Big 12 scenarios, because rather than go through all of these games and exactly all of the scenarios, here's what I want to do. The Big 12 scenarios are wild. The Big 12 has 4 teams tied at 6-2 in conference. So that's Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado. 9 teams, by the way, are technically still alive if things get a little wonky and crazy, which it's the Big 12, they might. But I wanted to just outline those 4 teams because those are the most likely teams to go to the Big 12 championship game. And here's what I'm going to do. Not every single scenario for them. I want to outline the easiest path for each of those teams to make it to the Big 12 championship game. Arizona State and Iowa State are in the best position. If all 4 teams win, then Arizona State and Iowa State go to the Big 12 championship game in Dallas. If any 2 teams win, those 2 winners go of those 4. So then let's go to like the next most simplest scenarios for those 4 teams. Arizona State, if they beat Arizona in the Territorial Cup and the other 3 also win, they are in. The only situation where it gets messy, if they win, is if BYU were to lose and then ASU could lose out potentially on a 3-way tiebreaker with Iowa State and Colorado, depending on other results on Saturday, which gets wild. So rather than going into that, it's just like, hey, listen, win. All the other 3 teams win, and Arizona State goes. Iowa State, they need a win against Kansas State. They also need all the other 3 teams of those top 4 to win. It's wild. But similar to Arizona State, that could get messy even if they win. If BYU were to lose, then Iowa State could potentially lose out in a 3-way tiebreak with Arizona State and Colorado, depending on other results on Saturday. It is wild. Here's a BYU scenario, and this one's a little bit cleaner. They beat Houston plus a loss by either Arizona State or Iowa State, and they're in. Okay, so Cougars, that's your path. Colorado is in the worst scenario of all 4 because they need a win over Oklahoma State on Friday, and then they need 2 of the other 3 to lose. That's the cleanest path for Colorado. Now, again, there are other avenues for every team, including Texas Tech and Kansas State and a bunch of other teams. Those are your most likely scenarios that I just ran through right there. Again, the cleanest scenario is that if all four teams that are tied for first right now in the Big 12, if they all win, then Arizona State and Iowa State are going to the Big 12 championship game. I am very thankful for all of you for listening to this program. Make sure to share it with a friend on this holiday season. I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving dinner with your family. I hope you enjoy, hopefully, a turkey bowl outside. And more importantly, I am hoping that you enjoy the great college football games this weekend as we are nearing the completion of what has been, I think, one of the best regular seasons that we've had in a long time in college football. Enjoy Thanksgiving, everybody, and have a great week.